among the things that I do, one of the things I do is coordinate what's called the Civil Rights Program. Mostly our cases in Idaho are design construction cases. We have a lot of service animal cases too. We are getting more and more cases with deaf people who are not being accommodated. And nationally, the Department of Justice handles most of the prison reform type cases, unconstitutional treatment in prisons. Education goes through the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education. Housing goes through HUD. And we would get involved only if a housing case were caused by HUD, went up to DOJ, and DOJ asked for our assistance. And DOJ typically runs the case. And what this does is it makes the national enforcement of the ADA uniform. It can be cumbersome at times because we always have to look to DOJ for guidance when we resolve a case. Most of our other cases are criminal cases, my False Claims Act cases. If I'm suing somebody for negligently starting a forest fire, my other affirmative cases, all I need is Wendy Olson's approval and we are done. But in the civil rights arena, we have to have a national we have to have approval from DOJ because we want to treat everybody equally nationally. So the title of this program is the Fair Housing Act and how it intertwines with the ADA and Section 504. And this is just, we're not going to use the PowerPoint. I'm glad they turned it off. You'll see that there are a lot of similarities between this one and Wendy's anyway. But we're going to do a skit of the kinds of things that come up in everyday renting and business situations. And what I tell people when somebody files a complaint, usually it's under the ADA with me, and I say, somebody complained that you don't have enough parking, somebody complained that the entrance to your building is too steep, the ramp is too steep, and there's no handrail, and they write me a letter that says basically, go to somewhere. It is much better for them to say, okay, how can I fix it, than for me to call my architect from Main Justice who will come out here and find 100 violations. Because once we get into doing a full site survey, it's bad news. Because there's so little education in this area that people just don't know what to do. So the ADA was passed in 1991, and it is all of the information about the ADA can be found at ada.gov. And there are standards in 1991, and they were changed in 2010, and they apply to everything built after March 15th, 2012. So if we're talking about new construction, there are new standards. They aren't that different, but they are more expansive. They go into more recreational facilities, parks, pools, golf courses, and so those are the kinds of things that are associated with housing. Not low-income housing necessarily being associated with golf courses, but a lot of subdivisions and housing associations have recreational facilities that may or may not also be open to the public. And as somebody was saying earlier, if they're open to the public, then they are common area. They're not just fair housing. They're subject to the ADA. And to remind you what 504, the Rehabilitation Act, is, that was passed in 1973, and it basically says if you get federal money, you can't discriminate against somebody with a disability. And this is commonly seen in schools, because almost every school gets federal money. Even private schools get federal money. Every college gets federal money. Colleges couldn't run without federal money. And so colleges can't discriminate against people with disabilities, so they have to be fully accessible. And that means to the deaf, to the blind, to somebody with a disability. And disability is very broad. It goes to diseases that are chronic, and even if you're in remission, you still have a disability. The 6 months that you're in remission don't discount you from being disabled. So 504 is even broader, and it's one of these proxies. It overlaps fair housing and the ADA. It may also apply if somebody's getting federal money. Another place where you see 504 is hospitals. Every hospital gets federal money. Medicaid in Idaho is 71% federal money. Medicare is federal money. So TRICARE is federal money. Anybody that serves veterans is getting federal money. So, you know, my job, because the False Claims Act has to do with making a false claim to the government to get government money, I know how to find somebody who's getting federal money. I'm very good at it, finding that connection between the person and the federal money. And, you know, when somebody brings me a case from an agency, I always say, okay, what's the false claim? And they show me, they signed here that said they don't discriminate, and they do discriminate. That's a lie. And then, where are the federal funds? And we put that kind of case together. Yeah, and I want Dana to introduce herself and our other guests. I'm sorry, Dana. I keep saying Dana because I have another friend named Dana. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Dana Gober. Can you guys hear me? Okay. And I really do have a disability. I'm in a wheelchair. It's pretty obvious. I work with the Northwest ADA Center, Idaho. We provide technical assistance and training on the... Excuse me? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. We provide training and technical assistance on the Americans with Disabilities Act. We are not an enforcement agency. We cover the state. There's a number of organizations that are involved with the Northwest ADA Center, Idaho. We are part of the Centers for Independent Living. Today in the room, we've got James and Todd. Please stand up. They are really, really good resources, especially for housing. If you guys have a person with a disability that may need some kind of an accommodation, they can come out and look at the house or the apartment to tell you whether or not, you know, what you could be doing to do accessibility changes. Todd does this a lot. I can come out and look at your housing areas, like your rental office, some of the common areas, to tell you whether or not you need to do some accessibility changes to your facility. You know, you guys have heard a lot in the last 2 days about the rules, the laws, and for me, sitting back up there, how do you know what to comply with? What if you have to comply with the ADA, 504, our state law, fair housing? What do you do? Does anybody know?
Do it all.
That's right. So how do you know? What if they conflict?
You know,
one's more stricter. Amy, you cannot answer that.
well, I just want to point out there are a lot of agencies that have regulations beyond the ones that Dana, God, I'm just brain dead. That Dana pointed out. The Forest Service has its own regulations on what you do in a forest. Some cities have their own regulations on how to make streets, how to make curb cuts. CMS has regulations on what hospitals need to do. But the ADA is a civil right.
Right.
That trumps everything.
Well, it's which you look at which one's more stricter. Okay. So, does anybody know? A lot of people. I've been to trainings for building code officials, and they say when they're doing the training, if you comply with the building code, you will be in compliance with the ADA. Do you think that's true or false? Exactly. You guys have got an A today. I mean, that is one of the biggest problems I see with architects and building officials, because that is not true. ADA is a civil rights law. It is not a building code. Okay?
There are also some standards called the ANSI standards. Dana might know what they stand for, but it's another building standard, and I had an issue with a park recently, which could be a park within a housing facility, or this was a park within a shopping center. And the ground surface supposedly complied with the ANSI standards, which are standards of construction for accessibility. But I can tell you, I walked on it and I sank down about 4 inches. And my little 6-year-old grandson has cerebral palsy and he uses a walker. And there's no way he is going to play at that park. So I got, and these people were saying I've complied with the ANSI standards, and so I got my architect from DOJ out here. Too bad. And so we're now going to get, there are all kinds of play surfaces. There's about 6 different kinds that you can get where you don't actually have to make the whole play surface the same. You have to have a path of travel so that a disabled child or a disabled adult who's supervising the child can get to the child. And so, the stricter standards do comply, but also the ADA, Fair Housing Act, are civil rights. And civil rights are kind of the top of the line.
So right now we're going to do a few skits. We thought that it might be a good idea for you guys to feel comfortable we are all comfortable with our disabilities. So a lot of times, you've been told don't ask about the disability, don't ask for medical documentation, but we are here to let you ask us questions. But we're going to do a few skits first, and then if you do not leave our presentation, we have little gift things to give you at the end.
And
so
we're going to have a little quiz. So if anybody up here violates the law, you will get a chance to call us out. Now, Dana, I thought I might ask you to try to stand up and prove that you're in that wheelchair legitimately. That was me.
Too close.
Okay, can you introduce your other guests?
Yes. Cheryl. This is Cheryl Bloom. And Cheryl, you want to introduce yourself a little bit, what you do?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Bloom, and I actually wear many hats, but which one do you want me to wear today? I'm a legislative advocate for the National MS Society.
Woof! I'm her dog. I'm her service dog that she was supposed to bring today. Woof! Woof!
And I do have a service dog. Her name is Fallon. She's not here today. She's being a dog today. Service dogs are allowed to be dogs on their day. Amy, you're too close to me. Go away. And so service dogs are allowed to be dogs on some days. And so yesterday and today she's being a dog. So because she worked hard over the weekend. And so I'm allowing her to be a dog. So she's not with me because I do not need her 24/7. So, which is probably something that many of you are not aware of, that there are people with invisible disabilities who don't need their dogs 24/7. But there are people with visible disabilities who do need their service dogs 24/7. I just don't happen to need mine 24/7. So, Woof Woof is not with me today.
You got me instead. Under the ADA, we call them non-obvious disabilities. And so,
Hello, I'm Candy Harris. I have a visible disability, unless I take my glasses off, and then of course I can see just fine. I'd like to introduce my dog Spot. I don't have to clean up after it or feed it. I just replace it now and then, which you can't do with your own service dog. I am a rehab teacher for the Idaho Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and have been for 23 years. And I met Dana when she actually was the independent living coordinator at the commission. She said 20, I think it's a lot longer than 20 years ago, but she always looks young. Basically, I teach ADLs, Braille, orientation mobility, and also computer technology, darn it. But we had to, we had to come into the age, and so I had to learn how to do it too.
Okay, who's our first? Now I'm a landlord and I'm renting apartments, and this is my counter in my office, and I have some people that are going to come see me today because they want to rent apartments. And who's first? Come in.
Hello?
Well, come in. Are you coming in or not?
I do want to. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to find. And
Well, what's your problem?
well, the door appears to be open, but there's an impediment in front of me.
What would
you
that-
mind?
Well,
There seems to be a
I have to
surface
get
in
out
front
of my
me.
chair and come. What is? Oh, excuse me. Can I help you?
Actually, at this point in time, I think it would be great if you did help me, and I'd like to just take your elbow, and then you can lead me to where you wish me to be.
Okay. Well, why don't you have a seat here at my desk? Don't sit down because there's no chair there.
That was a good affirmative statement.
And I'll get you a chair. I'll get you a chair. I'm not used to dealing with people like you, and so I didn't, sorry about that. Okay, now there's a chair behind you. Do you need any help?
I believe I can find
How do you
chair.
get into a chair if you can't see it?
Just like that.
Oh, very good. I'm awesome.
I'm
Hey, give me a
sorry
high
that
five.
you've never-
Give me a high five. Here, give me a high five. Now, how can I
I
help
hate to ask this, but are you having difficulty today?
you? No, I'm just fine. It's not 5 o'clock yet, and I have not been to the bar yet.
Good to know.
Now, how can I help you?
Well, quite frankly, I would like to rent an apartment from you. 2-bedroom, 1 bath. Reasonably good size. I've looked at your information.
You've looked? Is that like a joke?
Yes, it is a joke. However, I do have talking computer software, so yes, I can read it. And we just continue saying, we look, we see, goodbye, see you tomorrow. Hello, it's good to see you. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I've looked at the website. I like what I've seen, and I've had a couple of friends go by and tell me that the grounds look very nice, which is important to me, and also that the facility seems well kept up.
So why would it be important for you for the grounds to look nice?
Because I want to live where someplace is attractive.
Well, I've got, the front of the apartments where the lawn is, and then I've got the back where the alley is, and I don't see why you would even care.
Why would you ask that question?
Well, because it's much easier to rent the apartments that are in front of the nice lawn. Duh.
I'm beginning to lose my courage with you.
Oh, well, hang on. I do have some available apartments. So you want a 2-bedroom. Does that mean that you have other people in your family?
No, there's just me and my dogs.
And I'm sorry, your what's?
My dogs.
And how many dogs?
2.
Why would you need 2 dogs?
One is my service animal, and he's a guide dog. The other one actually is my comfort dog.
Well, we don't allow pets.
Oh, have you read the ADA regulations?
Okay. How many statutes would we be violating? What would we be violating? All of them. Everything. And I don't know if we get, and I thought another way to get federal money is a lot of people get SBA loans to build, developers get SBA loans, and some of them do it fraudulently, I have to unfortunately say, but SBA has these preferences. If you are a woman-owned business, or if you are in a particular rural area, or you have certain qualifications of you in an underserved community, you can get special SBA loans. And I've had cases where people fraudulently become some women-owned business to get these SBA loans, and it turns out the woman doesn't even know the first thing about what's going on in the business. And so, but legitimately, if that happened, you would be getting federal funds while you were developing something. So let's just say that this has been constructed with federal funds. So all of the above. Now back to your apartment. So you need 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, I assume a kitchen.
Well, yes.
Okay, and I do
didn't
have a
mention that I
second.
thought it came with. I just wanted to know particularly that I need the 2 bedrooms.
Well, why would you need 2 bedrooms?
I have none of your business. No.
Are you planning on like adopting children or being a foster parent?
Really none of your business, but no.
Okay. Are you going to conduct a business in the apartment?
None of your business. I just want 2 bedrooms. I like to run around nude, and the only place to do it is with no furniture. I'm not a little girl, you know.
She gets the candy. And so are you employed?
Yes, I am.
Where are you employed?
Idaho Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
And so is this a permanent job where you're going to be able to pay for your rent?
I believe, but that's not really your business. As long as I feel that I can pay for it, I can show that I can pay for it, then do you really care? I can give you a W-2.
All these government do-good businesses, you know, like the Facility of the Blind, the Legal Aid, the Fair Housing Commission, I mean, they don't have any money. They can't pay you very much. If you don't have a husband, I mean, how do I know you're going to pay the rent?
You don't know if I do or do not have a husband. And actually, you don't know if I'm going to pay the rent. I'm just affirming to you that I can pay the rent.
Okay.
And our office has been there in the same place for 47 years. I do believe that we are far more able to take care of ourselves than perhaps you are, since this building's only been up for 18 months. In fact...
Well, aren't you the smarty pants?
I told you, I looked at your website.
Well, would you like a tour of the grounds? Not that it's going to help, but I'd be happy to give you a tour of the grounds.
Not with you, but I'd like to see how you're going to, if I do decide, and I am kind of up in the air at this moment, I'll ask a question. No, it's going to be okay. How are you going to present the paperwork, the contract to me?
I can read it to you. Would you trust me to read it to you?
No. I know that you can read it to me, but would you mind having somebody else come in and read it? I can provide my own interpreter.
Oh, I have a 13-year-old daughter who could read it to you.
Gosh, I just went to a training about that. I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, well, I suppose you could bring in a family member and have somebody read it to you. That would be okay.
That would be all right. I do have a reader-driver. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that would be okay.
Okay.
But I'm going to need some proof of your income, that this isn't just some sort of fly-by-night do-gooder volunteer job, and that you really have income. Unless
I would be happy to fill out an FNA for you.
Okay. You can do that.
And how am I going to do that?
Well, I was just going to ask you the same thing. I could ask you the questions and you could answer them and I could write them down. Or maybe this driver friend that you have could help you do that. Is that something that he or she normally does for you?
Yes.
Oh.
However, you may fill it out because now suddenly you're mellowing.
That doesn't even deserve an answer. You know, I think there's other people that have appointments. I think you need to go get your driver and come back. If you want a tour, maybe your driver can give you a tour of the grounds. Would that be okay?
This is not a secure building.
Well, sure it is. You've got We got a deadbolt on every apartment.
However, how am I going to be protected within my building unless it is secure on the outside?
Well, maybe you need your driver to be there.
I think I will call my driver, and you don't have to worry about me coming back.
Okay. And I guess the thing is that, you know, because Dana has come to my office and helped me with some workshops, and it, you know, when you can really sit there and joke about it and talk to a person with a disability and ask them, we had Dana come in and do a day in the life and what's it like, and it's things that you never would think of. And having seen my grandson now go through it for 3 years, he was walking on the beach for the first time in bare feet. He wears braces on his shoes, and it just occurred to me, what does sand feel like to a 6-year-old who's has these plastic things under his feet to flex his feet, because his feet point, and so he is going through a lot of intense therapy, and he may be able to walk someday, but now he needs aids. And this was, I mean, amazing to see his face walking on the sand. So until you really realize, you really see it, and of course I was given this assignment before my grandson was diagnosed, and then I've been in kind of parallel to the diagnosis, to my assignment to do these civil rights cases. I've been watching the development of what it takes for a family to bring up a child with a disability, and all of the services that you need and all the accommodations you need to make. And so I just have to thank our friends for coming and sharing their lives with us. Is somebody, oh, come in.
Good afternoon.
And can I help you?
Yes, I was led to believe that you have some openings in your apartment complex.
I do. I have openings in the front of it next to the garden, and I also have openings in the back next to the alley. And I have openings on the first and the second floor, although I didn't mention that to my last person. I just wasn't sure. I wanted her to know that I had openings on the first floor. Oh. And what kind of apartment are you looking for?
I'm looking for a ground floor apartment, preferably a 2-bedroom, and I'm looking for an apartment where I can bring my service dog.
I'm sorry. Do you have a person in your family that has a disability?
No.
Well, then why would you think you can have a service dog?
Because I have a disability.
Well, we don't allow pets, and we don't allow people to bring in dogs and call them service dogs.
Well, my dog is not a pet. She's a service dog. According to the ADA, she's qualified to be my service dog.
ADA. I seem to be hearing that a lot today. Why would you...
You have a problem with it?
Well, it's a big inconvenience. I have a really nice garden and a lot of grass here, and dogs just rip it up.
So would you like to trade your disability for mine?
Okay, I got to interrupt. There's a sign I saw in France, and it says in French, it was a big, and I took a picture of it. It was a big accessible parking sign, and it said, "If you take my place, take my disability too," in French. It was so great.
I would gladly trade yours for mine.
Okay, well, what's your disability?
I'm sorry, you're not allowed to ask that.
What do you mean I'm not allowed to ask that?
That's
Are you my
against the
mother?
law. Well, I'm not old enough to be your mother.
Well, what kind of dog is this service dog? Is it one of these little chihuahuas?
She's a 70-pound yellow lab.
And do you ride her? Is that the...
No.
Well, you're not going to tell
I'm
me...
a little big to ride her.
Do you have a doctor's note that you need this dog?
Not that that's any of your business, but
No doctor's notes for the ADA at all,
ever.
ever. So a little different than the Fair Housing Act. Never, ever. Never, ever. No doctor's notes required for the ADA ever. Well, what does your dog do for you,
She...
other than poop on my grass?
Well, it's good fertilizer, but she is my mobility assist dog.
Well,
And
you
I've
seem to be
actually-
walking just fine to me.
Well, some days I can walk, some days I can't.
Well, so let's get back to this apartment. Are you employed?
Yes,
And are you married?
none of your business.
Well, you asked for a two-bedroom apartment. Are you going to bring in some gaggle of children that are going to tromp on my flowers?
Not today.
Well, did you see our application online?
I did.
And have you filled it out?
No.
Well,
I would like to look.
oh, you would like to look. Well, do you have your service dog with you?
Not today.
Well, am I supposed to be your service dog?
Can you bark?
How are we going to go look? If you really need this service dog, how are you going to go look at the grounds without your service dog?
Did you hear what I said earlier? You don't seem to be listening very well. I said, today I can walk. I do not need her today. So yes, if you would like to give me a tour, I would gladly walk behind you.
Okay, well, why don't you go out and tour the outside grounds by yourself? You know there's some blind woman out there. She's probably lost. If you might reel her in. You might reel her in and bring her back and you know.
So
but-
can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
So I take it that this is a non-pet friendly complex?
well, this is a friendly complex, but we don't allow pets.
That was that non-pet friendly complex.
I think you could say that.
So in other words, you don't allow pets.
Correct.
Okay. So I would need to request reasonable accommodations to bring in my service animal, correct? Are you familiar with that term?
Well, you know, we had somebody that asked for that once. I can't remember what happened. We've never had a dog in this complex. This complex is only 18 months old.
Okay, so you're not familiar with the protocol on reasonable accommodations then?
Protocol? No.
Well, you got an attitude, lady.
No, but you know what? Before I'm going to make any accommodation of anything, I need an application from you, and I didn't make sure that you have enough money to pay the rent, and that you aren't some weirdo ex-felon who is going to come destroy my beautiful, brand new apartment complex and the reputation.
And how would you know that?
Well, I can do background checks.
Okay. So can I.
So why don't you go online, fill out the application, or I can give you an application and you can go outside into the garden and complete it and bring it back, and then I can do a background check and we can talk about this reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
And bring your dog next time. I need to see the dog.
So you're going to make a judgment on the sight of my dog?
Well, let's make sure it really is what you say it is, and not like three little yipping chihuahuas.
Ooh. I don't think so. See you later.
Okay. And so, Ann, I had to leave during your service animal presentation. Did you decide that service animals in the fair housing venue, more than one is allowed?
Yes, so under the Federal Fair Housing Act, you can have, just like you said, you can have multiple animals, and we recommend that you have a proof of need for each animal unless it's an August disability with an August need, you don't have to. But there are cases, like the Janish case, where they had a symbiotic relationship. Remember I talked about that yesterday, where they had multiple cats, and they only addressed one disabling condition, but the animals together worked to alleviate or to address that and to use it as dwelling. There has been case law, so just be careful. There are two schools of thoughts on that.
Right, well, the ADA is less clear, and so the ADA does talk about service animal.
Please summarize what Zoe said, because nobody.
Okay, Zoanne was saying that under the Fair Housing Act, yes, you may have animals that work together to perform, to help a person. They perform complementary services, and so there may be times when you do have multiple animals. You may have a doctor's note for each animal under the Fair Housing Act. The ADA is a little bit different, although the ADA allows miniature horses, but it allows a miniature horse or a service animal, service dog. Service dog. Well, it defines service animal as a dog or a miniature horse, but it's in the singular in the ADA, and so when there's multiple dogs or multiple animals, it can be a little trickier. Okay, so it's almost time to close. I got to get out of here by 4 o'clock.
So, you guys, we're really exaggerating today, as you notice, but I get a lot of calls. You'd be surprised at how many people really act like this. And you know, I don't think people really discriminate on purpose.
Eat the mic, eat the mic.
So, I don't think people really discriminate on purpose. I think that we have grown up to think of people with disabilities as being helpless and not being able to do things for themselves. Now, when you start treating people like that, think about how you want to be treated yourself. So, I mean, I sometimes, before I started working at the Commission for the Blind years ago, I had never met a person who was blind that was independent. When I got in a car wreck many, many years ago, I had never met a person in a wheelchair that was doing anything. So think about how you look at a disability, about how you would treat somebody, and how you would treat yourself if you had a disability. Todd, we have some sticks, measuring sticks, that we're going to hand out to everybody. On
that's
these
right.
sticks, when you guys go out, there's some really simple things you can do for access. You can first look at the parking lot. Are there accessible spaces in that parking lot? Is there an accessible pathway to get into the rental office? Once you get in, can you access the services in there? Now, if I was going to look at an apartment and you guys had a pool, is there a lift in the pool? Well, that may or may not be required depending on how you use that pool. Todd, you want to hand those out? So on these measuring sticks, you'll see the measurement for a pathway, a measurement for underneath a table, and a measurement for a door. And those are three common things that you'll look at. We also put down some resources for you that you all have. There's some cases on there about, some of the construction cases, also the reasonable accommodation cases. We've got our names, our resources for you guys to call us if you have questions. So do you guys have any questions for us?
I think we've done the skits, and Dana and I don't need to go through it again, and all the things, Dana and I don't need to go through it again, and all the things that I would do wrong, but I just wanted to show you that this counter, it's not uncommon for somebody in a wheelchair to come up to a counter they can't write on. And any counter in a public accommodation, is just about everything, from stores to restaurants to hotels to common areas to any place the public accesses, and any place anybody would normally, a surface somebody would normally use to write on, to sign a charge slip on, to pass money over, needs to be at 30 inches from the ground, and it needs to be, it can't just be a little shelf, it's got to be a certain width, and you can find this all in the design standards under the ADA. But just think of what it's like to apply to go into an apartment if you're blind, if you're deaf and they don't know how to communicate with you, if you're in a wheelchair. The manager's office has to be accessible. The lease office has to be accessible. The common grounds have to be accessible. If there's a dog park or a dog area, that has to be accessible. Everything connected to the area has to be accessible. Anything that is public has to be accessible and is then subject to the ADA. And so, again, on ada.gov, you can find the resources to figure out, and they have a technical assistance line where you can call DOJ architects and ask questions about, what do I do?
I do have one question, and Zoanne, you can probably answer this. So, if you live in an apartment complex and it's covered under HUD, if you, say for instance, I live in an apartment complex and I have a service animal and I have someone who wants to come visit me with a service animal, and in the guidelines or the rules of the complex it says my guests have to ask for reasonable accommodations to bring their service animal to visit me. Is this legal?
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
I missed that.
Yeah, it was one of my slides. It was last one.
So be aware that if you have a visitor who comes to your unit, you enjoy the same protections under the Fair Housing Act, the ADA, the 504, that a person who's a resident. And so, yeah, they're allowed to have their service animal, and Fair Housing Act is broader. You're allowed to have your companion animal, and the only difference would be with the companion animal, you might be required, if it's regular enough, to have some sort of proof of need. So be aware of that. Christina Miller would suggest that you look at it on a case-by-case basis, and she's our grant administrator from HUD, and she does, because we do get that question a lot. And so the very last slide on my service animal presentation yesterday actually contains that information. So when in doubt, I say allow people in, because you should, unless you're going to risk a fair housing violation. And when you have questions, you should contact Christina, or if you don't, you can contact us, contact Dana, these other colleagues, Amy. It's important that you do that.
And
but don't deny access.
And one of the distinctions that the ADA, between the ADA and the Fair Housing Act, the ADA does not provide for comfort animals, just service animals, which are defined as dogs and miniature horses. But there is a gray area, and it is a service animal for a non-obvious disability. And so under the ADA, you cannot, and here it is. And these are the most common cases that I get. And restaurants are the most common. And so...
And Starbucks.
Oh, let me add them. And so most of the people that come to me you don't have to have a jacket on the dog under the ADA. You don't have to have a card. You don't have to have a jacket. And people have cards and they have jackets just so they won't get hassled. And they still get. I had a woman a couple weeks ago. They pushed her hand out of the way when she pulled out her card. And so we're gonna pay a little.
We're going to pay him a visit.
We're gonna pay him a visit next week.
Fallon is going to be famous.
So the language of the ADA says that if you have I can't really bring the whole sentence to my brain right now, but the one that says you're not old enough to be my mother? essentially there are behavioral disorders, mental disorders, anxiety disorders. I think it doesn't say bipolar, but there are
PTSD.
PTSD. There are mental disorders that dogs can be trained to either sense before they're going to happen, which could include a seizure. That's real common. Or it could include an anxiety attack or a claustrophobic attack. And so there are also disorders that a dog can
DPT.
help with. What's DPT? Deep pressure tissue. Okay. But I was thinking somebody starts to have an anxiety attack and the dog licks their face, or, those are really tough cases because you can't ask what their disability is. You can ask what service the dog provides. Question. You don't. You don't. How do you know if this person is really disabled, is protected by the ADA? You don't.
You can ask two questions.
Under the ADA, yeah.
You can ask two questions. Is that a service dog? And what task does that dog perform for you? Period. What task does the dog perform for you?
See, and I just bring my little Aussie in here and say, well, she picks up things that I drop, and I'll take a treat, she'll drop it, and she'll pick it up. There's the service!
No, Amy. No, Amy. Picking up food off the floor is not a task.
You know what? Let me also just point out, the ADA has can do all the horrible things that the Fair Housing Act can do, and make you pay damages, make you pay attorneys, I don't know if it's the ADA attorney's fees. I know that, yes. No, some of our civil rights actions provide for attorneys, but the ADA can make you pay damages, and the damages go to the aggrieved individual. But only the United States Department of Justice can collect those damages. So if you wanted to sue somebody under the ADA, you would be suing them for an injunction to allow your service dog. I would be suing them to allow your service dog and to pay money. And so that's why those cases come to us. And that's why it's this incredible power. I mean, it's like, it's daunting. And so when I get a complainant, I mean, I'm supposed to investigate, and I go out, and I've been to Albertsons with this woman that had a dog in the shopping cart. It was a dachshund that she said was a service animal. And I determined this woman was highly disturbed anyway and probably needed the dog to function in society. But, it was really hard to, and the dog wasn't paying any attention to her. And Albertson's real beef with the woman was the dog was sitting in the seat of the cart. And what if the next person that picks up the cart is allergic to dogs? So we had the dog sit in a baby seat, never touch the cart, and, this woman never made a stink, and we didn't do a formal settlement with Albertsons. It was a one particular store, and that's fine. But a lot of these people that have these kinds of dogs are extremely disturbed. And there's such a fine line between comfort dogs and service dogs that provide a non-obvious service. But we interview them. We ask them many times what service a dog performs. And if you don't get the same answer every time, that's kind of a clue. But I get asked by this all the time from restaurants. How do I know this person needs a service dog? And one of the things you can't do, in my opinion, is you can't have the dog eating off your plate at the restaurant at the table. The dog sits on the floor. Now, if you have to have the dog in your lap, that's, that's another gray area. But the dog eating off the restaurant's dishes, I think that's a legitimate concern to other customers.
Okay, sorry, we're running out of time, so I need to make a few announcements. If you came in and forgot to check in, make sure to check in before you leave, because that's the only way you're going to get a certificate of attendance. Those of you on the webcast, if you registered, you're getting a certificate. If you just popped in, please email the ID fairhousing@gmail.com. We'll make sure you get one. Give us about 2 weeks, please. We do have other jobs we have to do too. So don't hound us. I I'm sure Amy will answer a few questions initially, but thank you very much. That's a day.